Catalyst: The Ultimate Strategies on How to Win at Work and in Life by Chandramouli Venkatasan, read by Avicenna. Part 1. Number 1. Real Individual Growth, the Catalyst for Success. In all my experiences and travel across the world, the one thing that has stood out is the hunger for success that most people have, Indians in particular. Often that hunger for success is simplified by most people into a desire for success and growth in their careers. Success in life is equal to success in career is often the operating assumption of most people. In the later portion of the book, I do try to give a more holistic dimension to success in life by including values, character, and other related aspects. However, in the first half of the book, I focus primarily on giving people what they want, the key to success at work. And I have a simple equation for career growth. Career growth equal to real individual growth plus minus environmental aspect. Real individual growth is the growth we experience in the duration of our careers and how much each one of us grows our knowledge, our skills, our judgment, our influence, and our communication, and etc. The second factor is environmental aspect, which covers things like the buoyancy of the job market, industry-related factor, relative availability of talent in your skills area, and etc. Let me first cover the impact of environmental aspect on career growth. Our careers are typically 40 years long. We start in our 20s and wind it up in our 60s. During these 40 years, we will have both environmental tailwinds and headwinds in our careers. An example of a tailwind would be the times in your career when the job market is hyper hot for the skills you have and there is a shortage of the skill you bring to the table. People tend to get jobs on salaries bigger than what they deserve and sometimes leading to short-lived growth bubbles. Another example of a tailwind is when your boss quits the company, you're not yet fully ready to take on that role, but the company decides it would rather to go with an insider, and this gives the job to you regardless. Such tailwinds are bound to support most of us in our career at one time or the other. Similarly, we have all also experienced headwinds in our career, and there are times when the economy is dragging, the job market is weak, and there are very few opportunities for growth. Another example of headwind is when you have been steadily getting ready for a big job, equipping yourself with the right experiences, presenting under the right leaders, and preparing yourself for the opportunity. And when the opportunity comes, the company decides it wants new thinking and a change in strategy and hence prefers to hire an outsider for the role as opposed to promoting an insider. You did nothing wrong, but the dice did not roll your way. My experience is that in a 40-year career, the headwinds and the tailwinds balance each other out. You have to be a very lucky person for the tailwinds over 40 years to be greater than the headwinds, and similarly, you have to be very unlucky for the headwinds to be greater than the tailwinds. For most people, the two balance out, and hence, going back to our career growth equation, this means that the environmental aspect will not be the deciding factor in driving career growth. The catalyst of career growth tends to be real individual growth. And simply put, your career will grow only as much as you are able to grow as an individual and as a professional. And what I call real individual growth, if you manage to grow your skills, your knowledge, your decision-making ability, your judgment, your influence on others, your communication skills, and etc., then you will experience career growth. Career growth is directly proportional to and is a function of a real individual growth. If you stop pushing yourself at any stage, your career growth also comes to a decreasing halt. Hence, the equation of career growth can be simplified to career growth equal to real individual growth. One day, I like to state this is through the expression you get what you deserve. Far too often in our career, we focus on the getting part of it. We focus on getting the promotion, getting the new job, getting career growth, and we do not focus on deserving more by increasing our capabilities, our skills, and so on. In a career, you get only what you deserve. It is useful to remember what is in our hands and focus on deserving more and driving our real individual growth. My belief is that if we stop focusing on career growth and put all our energies into real individual growth towards deserving more, then we will experience greater career growth It keeps our focus firmly on what we can influence, working on ourselves, rather than distracting ourselves with the thought of career growth all the time, which can cause anxiety and result in poor choices. To use a sporting analogy, if you want to become the captain of the team, you must focus on hitting the next ball out of the ground. If you continually keep hitting the balls out of the ground, there is a chance that one day you will be the captain. If you are desperately trying to become the captain, there will be so much anxiety that you will stop hitting the ball out of the park, which will then diminish your chance of achieving your goal. There is a similar thought in Indian philosophy. Tu karm kar, palchi chinta makar. Loosely translated, it means focus on the deeds, don't worry about the results. I'm sure similar thoughts exist in all cultures and religions, and this particular one comes from the Bhagavad Gita and was spoken by Lord Krishna for a while. I used to be intrigued on whether it is even possible to practice that philosophy, to focus only on deeds and not bother about the results. Are not the results important? How practical is it not to not bother about the result and only bother about the deeds? It took me many conversation and careful reflection to get my own thinking and understanding on this sorted out. My understanding now is the probability of getting the result you want increases when you stop thinking about the result and start focusing on the deeds for getting that result. Going back to our sporting analogy, if you want to become the captain of the cricket team, then the deeds toward that result are scoring consistently, becoming a leader among your fellow players, understanding the strategies of the game, and etc. If you focus on these deeds, then you maximize the probability of becoming the captain. But if you focus on becoming the captain without focusing on the deeds, you actually reduce the probability of attaining your goal. I believe career growth is something like that. The more you focus on it, the less effective it is. Instead of the more you focus on the deeds which lead to career growth, which is real individual growth, the more likely you are to have positive career growth. If you stop thinking about career growth, the next job, the next promotion, and instead be relentless in growing yourself and becoming continuously better, improving your knowledge, skills, judgment, influence, communication, and etc., the more career growth you will experience. Real individual growth, my friends, is the catalyst, the deeds for the result called career growth. So what does real individual growth mean, and how does one drive it? This is where Catalyst the book comes in. One of the most common misconceptions is the real individual growth happens by itself. Most people assume that if they work hard and spend years at work, then they are growing their skills, knowledge, and capabilities. That is misconception. Time and hard work alone do not drive real individual growth. It needs to be catalyzed. There are four core areas where this has to be done, and this book will cover these areas in detail. Experience needs a catalyst. The first area is that of our learning model. Our simplistic assumption is that if we spend enough time at work and work hard, then we are learning and gaining experience. This is fundamentally wrong. Time spent at work is not equal to experience. If that were true, all those with the same amount of work experience would be equally successful. Experience is not gained automatically, it has to be catalyzed. Higher productivity needs a catalyst. The next assumption is in the area of the personal productivity. We assume that as we keep growing, our productivity keeps increasing as well, and this assumption is wrong. It has to be catalyzed. It will not grow by itself, and many people get to senior level or even higher levels and fail, not because of a lack of capability, but because their productivity has not grown by itself over the years, and now they are caught as they face the complex multi-stakeholder, multitasking environment of senior roles requiring higher personal productivity. The improvement that they have not catalyzed. Productivity does not increase by itself. It has to be catalyzed. Catalyst for career management. The next area that requires a catalyst is that of career management. Our simplistic assumption is that if we succeed in the first half of our careers, we will automatically succeed in the second half as well. And this assumption is also incorrect. The second half needs the catalyst of specific effort and actions. Let's take two people with a roughly similar qualification and compare their career success after they have retired. Let us assume for a moment that one has been very successful while the other has been moderately successful. You will find that the bulk of their success difference develop only in the second half of their career. At the end of the first halves, they would have been equally successful, and most people are successful in the first half of their career, but very few in the second. Career success is the second half does not happen by itself. Based on success in the first half, it has to be catalyzed. Love and values has catalyst for success. The next area is that of the work-life interaction. Another simplistic assumption we make is that work has a huge impact on life, hence the focus on areas like work-life balance and stress management and so on. In my opinion, the impact of work on life is lower than the impact of life on work, and how we lead our life has a huge impact on how successful we are at work and indeed in life. There are a set of things which can have a tremendous positive catalyzing impact on our long-term success at work. Success at work does not happen by just looking at work. It is catalyzed by the way we live in our lives. And career growth is driven by real individual growth, and the real individual growth does not happen simply by working hard and spending years gathering experiences. How you can catalyze your really individual growth is the objective of this book, and the focus of the following chapters. While there are three distinct sections in this book, the first one is experience building, the second on career management, and the third one life and values. It's not necessary to see them in a sequential way. You need to not work first on experience, then on career management, and then on life and values. It's fine to work on all of them at the same time. Please do read the book with this in mind. Number 2. Time spent at work does not equal experience. Interviewer, tell me, what experience do you have? Candidate, I have 14 years experience doing financial accounting. Conversation like the one above play out all the time in the corporate world, and it's perfect to admit that experience is equal to time and can be measured in years. Nothing could be further from the truth. One of the foundational drivers of a real individual growth is experience. All of us know that experience is important. It is critical for success in career, and we all agree that we must gain a good experience in the relevant areas to become successful, and we are willing to invest our time, the most valuable and limited research we have, in getting it. Experience is important for success. Folks, in fact, it is super important, and yet most of us have an incomplete and inadequate understanding of it. I even start my training session by asking somebody in the audience, and how many years of experience do you have working? It often draws a chuckle. Then I follow up with, how many years of experience do you have sleeping? And the chuckle turns to laughter. And then there is usually a serious questions. How many years of experience do you have in finance or sales or marketing or HR? And there is a serious answer, no laughter. Why is it that we do not consider the time spent in activity like walking and sleeping an experience? How are we so sure that the time spent on working, on sales or marketing or production automatically becomes experience, while that spent walking or sleeping does not? Time does not become experience by itself, even at work. It has to be catalyzed. The reason we believe that the time spent walking and sleeping is not experience is because we perform this activity in a highly mechanical and thoughtless way. We do not have an active learning model associated with walking. We do not say the more we walk, the better we become at walking. It feels like we walk slowly, the same way we used to years ago, with no significant improvement over time. The book of our learning and walking happened in the first few years of our childhood. We learned rapidly, and there was a learning model, and the more we walked, the better we became, and then the learning stopped as we started doing it mechanically, thoughtlessly. Having established that time spent walking is not experience, except during childhood, and now let me establish that the contrary is also true. Walking is not experience for you and me, but for an athlete who participates in the Olympic walking event with his or her eyes set on the gold medal, it surely would be counted experience. They obviously have a learning model associated with walking which help them to get continuously better. Similarly, take the case of someone who is a professional model and walks the ramp and spend hours trying to perfect the walk. So walking experience for both the Olympic athlete and the model, but not for you and me, and this establishes that it is not the activity that determines whether something counts as experience or not, but the way in which it is done. The presence of the learning model as a catalyst determines whether the activity becomes experience or not. For both the Olympic athlete and us, the activity is the same, walking, but the former catalyzes that activity into experience with a learning model well done. The same can happen at work too. One of the greatest myths of our times is that experience at work is measured in units of time. Time is not an accurate measure of experience. If you are hiring and you see two candidates, one of the with the 10-year experience and the other with the 15 years of experience, your automatic assumption is that the latter has a greater experience. What if the person with the 15 years of experience work as if they were walking or sleeping at work, while the person with 10 years of experience work in a highly learning-oriented way, catalyzing their work into experience? The number of years of experience a person has at work is a measure of just that, how much time they have spent at work. It does not measure how powerful their learning during the period was, and it is not a measure of the experience they have built in the process. If experience is not equal to time, then how should we understand and define it? Let us go back to our hiring analogy. Our assumption is that given the same situation in the future, the candidate with 15 years of experience will do better than the one with 10 years, and hence, our implicit understanding of experience is about how it enables us to respond to future situation. And thus the purpose of experience for us is not to measure what we have done in the past, but to use it to do better in the future. Therein lies in the nub of the issue, which is how we should define experience. Should we define it as what we have done in the past, or should we define it as what is built in us for us to do better in the future? I fundamentally disagree with the paradigm of defining it based on the spent in the past, and there is only one purpose to it, which is how it enables us to do better in the future. I like to define experience as the algorithm that we have built in ourselves doing what we have done. You could also think of it as the software in you, the program in you. As we do stuff, we are continuously adding to the software, the program, trying to make it better, and that algorithm software program is our experience. That is what responds to situation in the future. Hence, put simply, the more powerful the algorithm, the better the response to the situation in the future. This means that the more experienced person is one whose algorithm is stronger, and not necessarily one who has spent more years or done more of the activity. The purpose of time spent and the activity done is to build the algorithm, to make it stronger over time, and any time spent or activity done that does not add to the algorithm, it's not experience. One of the greatest success factors at work, therefore, is our ability to convert time and activity into experience, the algorithm. My view is that what differentiates more successful people from less successful people is the effectiveness with which they convert time into experience. It does not happen by itself. It needs a catalyst. The rest of this chapter describes the catalyst. The MRR, the catalyst for converting time into experience. Let us go back to our example of the athlete in the Olympic walking event. We agree that walking is not experience for you and me, but it is for an athlete. What an athlete does to convert that activity into experience when you and I cannot, will help us understand the catalyst required for converting time and activity into experience. The first thing the athlete does is to set a target for the activity. He or she has a target of, let's say, 3 hours and 42 minutes for a 50-kilometer walk, and then the athlete measures the actual performance against that target. And let's say that the athlete actually clocked 3 hours and 49 minutes in the race. He or she then reviews the actual performance against the target and tries to understand the reason for the performance. In this case, the athlete might analyze different segments of the race, say the beginning, the middle, and the end, and might conclude that the end was poor, which means their stamina was poor and hence they need endurance training. Or the athlete could review different trainings and conclude that the performance in the uphill section of the race was poor, which could mean that the length of the stride going uphill was shorter than required, and which could be because of this hamstring muscle not being strong enough. Based on such analysis, the person would build a plan to work on performance improvement. The person of the learning model and the will to want to improve, and these are two drives that an athlete has in walking that you and I don't. Hence, it becomes experience for the athlete but a mindless activity for us. To summarize, having a target for activity, measuring the actual performance, and then reviewing the performance to understand why it was the way it was, that is the learning model that we need to employ in each and every activity to catalyze and convert our time and activity into experience, the algorithm. I call this the target, measure, and review (TMR) model. The most effective learning model at work. It sounds simple, but the tragedy is that the most people usually do not employ a learning model at work and hence do not convert their time into experience. In my judgment, half the time people spend at work, they do not employ a learning model, they do not have a target for the activity, they certainly have poor measurement systems, and they do not review their performance to understand the reason for it. People might find it difficult to accept that there is no TMR model in play for over half their time. This is because the companies have targets, which are often passed on to employees through annual goal setting, incentive processes, and other such activities. Hence, people believe that they have a target for every minute they spend at work, but let us dive deeper into this and analyze the truth. Let us say Mr. A is a sales manager in a reputed firm. Sales is a highly measurable function. There are targets, a measuring of actual sales, and a consequent review, and hence, Mr. A could be thinking, TMR for me is an automatic occurrence. I have a target for everything, I measure my actuals, and I review the performance all the time. So, all my time must be getting converted into experience. However, the question we are asking is not, does your role have a target, but are you converting your time into experience? To do that, it is not enough for you to roll to have a target. What is important is that every unit of time that you spend at work has a target. Hence, the question for Mr. A is not whether he has a sales target, but whether he has the target for every hour of time he has spent on activity, and whether he does the TMR for each hour and each day. Let us say Mr. A spends 5% of his time on hiring people for his team. Does that 5% have an effective TMR? This activity has an indirect contribution to the sales performance, and hence one could argue that the TMR for this 5% also happens through targeting, measuring, and reviewing the sales numbers. However, that linkage is the indirect and not a direct TMR of the activity and time spent in hiring people. The fact is, Mr. A probably did not have the target for his performance in hiring people, did not measure how he performed, and did not review the reason for that performance. The TMR for the sales performance does not make up for the absence of the TMR for the 5% of time spent on hiring, and there is therefore a question mark over whether Mr. A indeed catalyzed that 5% time into experience and improved his algorithm. My guess would be no. A similar activity on which Mr. A spent a lot of time is market and customer visits. Again, a situation in which time is often not converted into experience. This is because of the mistaken belief that targeting, measuring, and reviewing the sales numbers at the end of the month or year is a fair way of measuring and learning from each customer visit. However, the question we are again asking is about Mr. A converting time into experience, and that time is not spent on a monthly or annual basis, but hour by hour, visit by visit. If Mr. A wants to convert time into experience, he has to have the TMR process for each customer visit, and not assume that the TMR for the month or year is a proxy for that. The key thing, folks, is that we are talking about converting time into experience, and time at work is not spent at an aggregate level for each activity, but is spent by the hour, by the day, and that is why TMR at an aggregate level for the quarter or for the year does not help. The really effective people understand intuitively that they have to learn every hour and every day and have a catalyst for converting time into experience on an hourly, daily basis, and hence I believe that most people spend over 50% of their time at work as if they were walking or sleeping. They do not convert it into experience, and they do not use every hour to improve their algorithm. There is a second reason why most of us do not convert time at work into experience. That is because we mistakenly believe that organizational processes are equal to individual processes. I have often heard people say, I have a very demanding boss who reviews everything I do every day, so my experience building is happening automatically thanks to my boss. Yes, there is a role your company and your bosses play in building your experience, your algorithm, and we will discuss it in a greater detail in Chapter 7. However, let us examine whether that alone can happen in individual experience building. To understand that, we must understand the intent of the boss in reviewing you every day. It is mostly to ensure that the desired result are produced for the company. Your boss does not review you with the intention of improving your algorithm for the time you spend at work that day. Yes, there is some overlap between the review for the company and your algorithm improvement, but the review for the desired result is not fully effective in converting time into experience for individuals. Let me give another example to explain this further. Let us assume that you are part of the team that executed an important project for your company, like all important projects, and this one would also have had a target, measurements, and an active project review. In a way, there is a very active project TMR process. Would that process substitute for the individual TMR process and be effective in converting your time spent on that project into experience? I don't think so. Let me describe some scenarios and reasons for that. The project might have been very successful for the company, but does that mean it was a great experience for you? That would depend on how effective your contribution was in making that project. That would depend on how effective your contribution was in making that project a success and how effective your personal learning model was when making that contribution. Just because the project was a great success does not mean it was a great experience for you. And now let us assume that the project was a failure for the company. Does that mean it was a poor experience for you? It need not have been. If your contribution was effective and you had a very active personal TMR learning model for the time you spend on that project, it's likely to be a great experience builder for you. The project TMR process is the learning model the company puts into place for itself. Something I call the organizational experience building process. This can build the organizational experience and algorithm, but that does not mean that every member of the project team gets the same experience out of it. Each team member builds a different experience based on how effective their personal TMR was for the time they spent on the project. The fourth R. To ensure that the personal TMR is highly effective in such situation, I advocate adding a fourth R to TMR and making it the MRR. Yeah, this fourth R is reflection. And I would like people to reflect using a very specific questions like, what could I have done better? As is obvious from the emphasis, the two most important words in the questions are I and better. The reason for this is the purpose of reflection, which is to understand how to add to your experience and thus build your algorithm. To ensure that, you should focus on the I. If you reflect on the question, what could have been done better on this project without the I, then it will generate answers which improve the overall organizational experience, and it might not be specific to you. But if the question is, what could I have done better in this project, then the answers will strengthen your experience and you and your algorithm. The second critical word in that question is better. It does sound like a negative word, but the question is not what did I do well. The reason for the focus on the better again goes on to show why we are doing this reflection. Even if you have done well and achieved a lot of success in the project, only when you reflect on what you could have done better will it add to the algorithm. Only this will help you to build the experience that will enable you to respond to the situation in the future better than how you are responding today. The TMR process is the crucial learning model that converts time into experience. Often, however, when people work in a company, organizational TMR process overlaps with the individual TMR process, and hence reduce the effectiveness of the individual's converting time into experience. To make up for that, I recommend the catalyst of reflection. When you add the fourth R, when the TMR becomes TMRR, it will complete the process of you converting your time into your experience and distinct from the company converting its time into its experience. An example of the MRR I recently interacted with a young manager who had just completed a project. I said, "Let me help you catalyze that time you spent on the project and convert it into experience. Let us start with the question, what could I have done better in that project?" The young manager gave me a set of answers, but I felt they lacked depth, and so I wonder my question differently. If you started the project again with all the learning you have now, have done it once, and what would you do differently? A clearer list emerged of what could have been done better, and then I asked another questions. Why could you not anticipate these areas right up front and do the project even better the first time? Were they impossible to anticipate, and could they be known only after the project's completion? Or was it that you failed to anticipate what is possible to anticipate? You can imagine the quality of reflection that is required to answer that questions, and how that would build experience out of the time spent on this project. The young manager spent 3 months doing the project, but did not spend a few hours required to convert this 3 months into experience. A series of reflection questions like, what could I have done better? Is a crucial for truly converting time spent into valuable experience. If that is not done, then it is not time spent, but alas, time wasted. If there is one thing you take from this book and practice regularly, I hope it is reflection. It is a catalyst that is capable of significantly growing your experience and hence driving real individual growth. Just this one thing, I promise, will make you more successful in your career, and the key truth, however, is that the most of us will struggle to practice regularly, and we know it is good for us, but we may not be able to do it with regularly and consistency, even if we have good intention, like a dieting, exercising, and reading regularly. We do not convert this into behavior and action, and I am afraid that even something as important as the TMRR possess, a catalyst that can single-handedly transform how successful you are in your career, might remain a good intention with most of you. Building the reflection habit. What, then, is the key to converting intention into lasting behavior and action? I believe that key is building a habit. Good intent gets converted to action when it gets ingrained as a habit. And most of you did not forget to brush your teeth today, even if you slept late last night, because it is ingrained as a habit. If we could ingrain reflection as a habit, like brushing our teeth, then we would reflect every day, and we would build greater experience and achieve much more success in our career. The key to building a habit is persistent in the first 15 to 30 repetitions of building the habit. Today, brushing our teeth is an effortless habit for us, but for our parents who ensure that in this became a habit for us, it means chasing us when we were children and ensuring that we did it, and they forced us, induced us, and convinced us to do it every day till it became a habit. The habit of reflection is similar. It requires us to show the same persistence in the initial phase until it becomes an ingrained habit. And one way to ensuring a habit is through the concept of an anchoring. If our parents had taught us that it was acceptable to brush our teeth anytime we wanted during the day, not necessarily first thing in the morning, then maybe on some days we would forget to do it. But because the habit is anchored in the occasion of waking up in the morning, there is a much greater chance that we practice it every day. Similarly, if we could ensure the reflection habit, then there is a much greater chance it will be practiced every day. My own anchor for the reflection habit is at the end of the workday, when I get into my car to go back home from work, and I spend the first 15 minutes reflecting, answering the question, and what could I have done better? It is now an anchored habit every evening after work when I am in the car, and I would automatically start to reflect. And it happens every day without fail. I do have the privilege of having the car for those of you who drive. It might not be safe to reflect while driving, so to find a different anchor. Maybe the evening drive or ride back, maybe 15 minutes on either side of the lunch break, maybe just before I sleep, and whatever the occasion, anchoring is going to make it happen every day. And if it happens every day, then you have a significantly higher chance of increasing your experience, growing your algorithm, and being more successful. Unleash the catalyst. Time is the single greatest investment, and and resource you put into your career. However, this time is not automatically converted into the experience, an algorithm that will drive your real individual growth and career success. Number 2. To convert time into experience, you require a catalyst. That catalyst is TMRR, Target, Measure, Review, and Reflect. And number 3, to make this effective, you must build an anchored habit of reflection on the questions. What could I have done better? The single greatest difference I have seen between more successful people and less successful people is their ability to catalyze and convert time into experience. Hence, it is worth all the effort that you can put in to adopt the catalyst of TMRR in your work and develop an anchor habit of a daily reflection. Number 3. Maximize learning cycles. I have witnessed the professional journeys of several successful people, and one common aspect in their journeys is that they have all had the opportunity to be an integral end-to-end part of a very important project or initiative or transformation. Additionally, that project or initiative seems to have played a significant role in building the experiential algorithm for the successful individuals and has contributed disproportionately to their learning and real individual growth. In my work life, I was involved early on a project for creating a full new segment for my company, and this involved studying the market, identifying the opportunity, formulating an entry strategy, and developing the product, followed by launching the product and taking necessary action to build that segment. I was involved with this project for close to 3.5 years, and I learned the end-to-end game of creating a segment from its infancy. This was an important project for the company, and companies often use the terms like project, transformation, or initiative for such efforts. For me as an individual, it was more than just a project. It was more than just building a new segment. It was an extraordinary experience building process with a huge learning. A project of this can impact experience, learning, and real individual growth. Hence, for an individual perspective, instead of calling it a project, I like to use the term learning cycle. Each of these projects or initiatives represent a potential learning cycle for individuals. A learning cycle is any project, initiative, or transformation that happens routinely in companies. A new product launch, and that learning cycle starts with the process of identifying the need for a new product, building a business proposal for it, and going through the product development cycle, including prototyping, researching, and testing as required, building the manufacturing or service capabilities required, and then launching it into the market. The learning cycle ends after the launch, when the new product has stabilized in the market and corrective action, if required, has been taken. This whole thing end-to-end is one learning cycle. Any major project or initiative represents a potential learning cycle. It could be the conceptualization and execution of a major organizational structure and culture change. It could be an initiative for significant new distribution creation. It could be a project for cost reduction and fundamental transformation of the end-to-end supply chain, or it could be the launch of the new enterprise software. Each of these initiative or project, another of this nature, represent a significant potential learning cycle for individuals to grow their experience and drive real individual growth. Let us first understand the relationship between TMRR, described in the earlier chapter, and the learning cycle. The TMRR is the how of building experience and real individual growth, while the learning cycle is the what of it, as in on what opportunity do you apply the MRR, and both create a huge impact as the cumulative learning based on these two aspects is multiplicative. The learning cycle represents the potential of experience building in a project or initiative, while the MRR is a process by which you extract that experience building opportunity. An analogy to understand that would be to visualize an artist and a performance opportunity. The learning cycle is equivalent to the size, scale, and stature of the stage on which the artist performed. The greater the size of the audience, the greater the prestige of the stage, and the greater the opportunity for the artist to create an impact. Having said that, that opportunity for creating impact will be realized only if the artist performs well. How well the artist performs is the equivalent of the the MRR for experience building, and hence the cumulative impact the artist can create is a combination of the scale or stature of the stage and the performance of the artist. If both are great, the artist creates a tremendous impact. However, if either of them is small, then the cumulative impact is significantly reduced because it is a multiplicative equation. Hence, a great performance on a small stage does not create great impact for this artist. Equally, a poor performance on a great stage also does not create impact for the artist. Only when both the stage and the performance are great does the impact become great. That is how one needs to think of the learning cycle and the DMRR experience building process. The learning cycle represents the stage. The more significant the learning cycle, the greater the opportunity to drive real individual growth and build up experience. The DMRR is equivalent to the artist's performance, and how much experience you extract out of the learning cycle will be driven by how well you apply the DMRR process on the learning cycle. Hence, if you want to drive real individual growth in the quest for success, then you have to maximize both the size and scale of the learning cycle you participate in and extraction of experience through effective DMRR. And when I observe more successful people in their career, that is precisely what I found they did. I have observed that more successful people do these two things better than less successful people. Number one, successful people seem to have participated in the more major learning cycles than those who are less successful. Number two, successful people seem to have extracted more experience and real individual growth out of the learning cycles they participated in than less successful people. Make major learning cycles happen. I'm starting with the first observation. Successful people seem to have participated in more major learning cycles than those who are less successful. The more I engage with and observe successful people, the clearer it is to me that each one of them has had the opportunity to be an integral end-to-end part of major learning cycle in their careers. And in many cases, these people were responsible for leading those initiatives, not just participating in them, and hence the impact of the learning cycle was even more profound. In some cases, very early on in their career, by sheer gut luck, serendipity of being in the right place at the right time, they got drafted into key initiatives that proved to be major learning cycles, and hence had a transformational impact of their experience and real individual growth and consequent career success. Some of them asked for and became part of the major initiative even if they were originally not a part of it, and that initiative became a major learning cycle for them. In some cases, they developed a powerful new initiative or transformation as a part of their day job and went on to lead it, and that created a powerful learning cycle for them that fundamentally transformed their growth and career. Whichever way it happened, the fact remained the major learning cycle were a very important catalyst in the success of these people. To quote a real situation, many years ago, I had a high-quality brand manager working in my team. That was the time I initiated a project on fundamental brand transformation, going to the very core of what the brand stands for, and worked with the brand consulting company. In the initial phase, the brand manager worked with me on that project, and then I happened to leave the company. Hence, he got the opportunity to lead a project, which he did with a great success, completely reinventing the brand. It was a 3-year learning cycle of brand transformation with initial tutelage from me and then independent charge. The person has gone on to become extraordinarily successful in his career, garnering much global acclaim, and I have no doubt that the brand transformation learning cycle in the formative stages of his career was pivotal in the building an experience algorithm on which his subsequent launch was built. This and many other such examples made it apparent to me that if you want more than average success in your career, you must not only do your daily 9 to 5 job, but also seek an opportunity to participate in a major project, initiative, or transformation that can be the success-creating learning cycle that your career needs. For many of these people, the major learning cycle happened by change, and yet something that happened by change had a profound impact on their professional success. The question then is, can you make a major learning cycle happen in your career? Preferably in the earlier stages, are you going to depend on change? What does it take to engender a major learning cycle in your career? There are many ways to make this happen. First and foremost, keep your eyes and ears open. Such initiatives abound in any company. See if any of these fit your skills, if you can make a contribution to any of them, and then try and become part of that initiative. And you can do this by asking, volunteering, or putting yourself in a place where that initiative needs you. Another way is to conceptualize a transformational initiative as a part of your day job and then lead that and make it a major learning cycle. If you are in marketing, you can conceptualize a significant new product opportunity which the company finds so interesting that they give you the mandate and the resources to lead that project end to end, making it a big learning cycle. Or if you are heading a factory, you can conceptualize a significant capacity expansion opportunity that becomes a major initiative for the company and a major learning cycle for you. Or if you are an IT professional, you can conceptualize a significant artificial intelligence based decision-making process that can automate many manual decisions, and then you can get to lead the initiative, making a milestone learning cycle for your career. Or if you are an HR professional, you can conceptualize a new way of incentivizing employees and then lead that initiative in the end-to-end implementation, making it a rewarding learning cycle for you. Whichever way it happens, whether you conceptualize it or participate in an already conceptualized initiative, the opportunity to be a part of it, which can be a major learning cycle, is a key catalyst in a successful career. It is sad to meet people who are capable, but for whatever reason have never been a part of major transformational learning cycle opportunity, hence have not experienced the career success they had the potential for. If you get lucky and get to participate in a big learning cycle, that is fantastic. But if you are not lucky and a major learning cycle does not come your way, then you have to make one happen in your career. It is absolutely imperative as a catalyst for success. Yeah, get more out of it. The second observation I was made. Successful people seem to get more out of learning cycle they participate in than less successful people. So while the first observation was about the opportunity to participate in a learning cycle, the second observation is about what you get out of it. And many people get to participate in a major learning cycle, but are unable to get a real individual growth of it. Hence, it is not correct to assume that just participating in a learning cycle is enough to extract experience and real individual growth. That experience and real individual growth has to be catalyzed. Two people participating in the same initiative, the same learning cycle, can end up with a very different experiences and a real individual growth depending on whether they catalyze the learning opportunity or not. So what does it take to catalyze experience and a real individual growth from the opportunity to participate in a major learning cycle? There are 4 things I have observed successful people do, and I would like to describe them in the following 5. Number 4, improve personal productivity. Many years ago, I had a very capable individual working for me, somebody whom I thought very highly of, the kind of you proclaim as excellent. When a very senior position opened up, I grabbed the change to elevate that person to the senior role. And after a year, much to my dismay, things did not work out, and I had to actually move that person from the role to a less challenging one. I reflected on the whys of it and realized that while the person had all the necessary skill and capability for the role, while he had a well-developed experience algorithm, he did not possess the necessary productivity to make a complex role work. He could not handle the multitasking the complex role require, and the fact that many things have to be done at the same time and you have to be on top of all of them. Could not decide which meeting to spend time on, which issue needed long deliberations, which issues should not be allowed to take more than 5 minutes, and so on. None of these were capability issue. If there were 48 hours in a day, the person had all the tools and wherewithal to succeed. But there are only 24 hours in a day, and that is where productivity comes in. And that episode taught me that success is a partnership of the experience, algorithm, and productivity. The algorithm is your ability to respond to a situation and get to the right answer. It is the ability to generate solution to complex problem in a way. The experience algorithm is the summary of your capabilities. That summary of capabilities has to be put to productive use to be able to finally create value and a favorable output. The output then is a multiplication of the algorithm and the productivity used in employing it. We have all seen different kinds of people, and there are people who are highly capable and dazzle with insight, strategic thinking, and knowledge, but at times they leave you exasperated by their lack of output and their inability to get things done and manage complexity. These are the people who are often labeled as high potential but are yet to fire fully. They possess a high quality algorithm but are poor on productivity, and then there are those who are moderate on capability, cannot create breakthrough solutions or strategies. In effect, have a moderately develop algorithm but seems to get things done when told what to do, follow up diligently, and are very disciplined about timelines, commitments, and etc. Such people are often referred to loosely as the doors, and they are high on productivity but moderate on the algorithm. The real high performance. Those who achieve exceptional success are those who are good at both, and they have a highly developed algorithm which they employ with the highest productivity and hence are able to deliver both high quality and high quantity of output, making them highly successful in their careers. Such people are few and far between. If you want the highest level of success in your career, you have to aim for that high bar of both a fantastic algorithm representing the summary of your capabilities and excellent productivity to convert that algorithm into output. Productivity is the means by which you convert your algorithm into output. Most people who want to succeed do seem to realize the need to grow their algorithm or capabilities such as a necessary prerequisite for success. I describe it using the phrase experience algorithm. These people might not describe it in the same way, but they all understand that if they have to achieve higher success, then they have to continuously grow their capabilities, and there is a high degree of awareness that success requires capabilities, and that if I have to be successful, I have to make an active effort to grow my algorithm, or whatever words I use to describe it. However, interestingly, there is not the same degree of self-awareness about the need to grow productivity, and so there is often no effort put into increasing it. This is one of the most important mistakes people make and is often the reason they don't achieve the full success they otherwise can. The reason for this lack of effort in growing one's productivity is two-pronged. The first is the lack of self-awareness. As I mentioned above, most people are aware that to succeed, they have to grow their skills and capabilities, their algorithm, but they don't realize that it is equally important to grow their productivity. The second reason is the mistaken assumption that productivity grows by itself. The thought that if you work hard every day, if you keep achieving results, your productivity will grow by itself. It is the same myth that I pointed out in the context of experience. The mistaken assumption that if you keep working hard and putting in time, your experience is building up by itself. The same myth is prevalent to an even higher degree in the context of productivity. No. Folks, productivity does not grow by itself. It has to be catalyzed to grow. In this chapter, I want to deal with these two issues. First, to make you aware that you need to improve your productivity, and second, to show you some technique by which you can catalyze the growth of your productivity. The why of productivity. Why do you need to grow your productivity? Why is it so important for long-term career success? As people go up to corporate ladder, get to higher position, and here is what happened. They must have built up the higher order algorithm and capabilities to succeed at the higher level. So let us assume that is the case, but is that enough? As they go higher, the demand of the job also rises, and a company gives you a higher order job, higher little title, and higher pay without having a higher expectation of output from you. You don't go higher with us being the same. to deliver that higher ask. Let's say you have built up the higher order algorithm. But apart from that, you also need the more time and energy to meet that higher order ask. Unfortunately, as we all know, time is a constant at 24 hours a day, and I always say the only thing common between a watchman and a chairman is 24 hours a day. If somebody progresses from being a watchman to a chairman, either with somebody such a great success in their career, they have to deal with the fact that they have to meet the requirement of being a chairman with the same 24 hours they had as a watchman. As you get to senior levels, two things change. First, the complexity of the problems or issue you deal with, and second, the number, quantity, breadth of the issues. Superior capabilities and algorithm helps you deal with the higher complexity of the problem, but it is only higher productivity that will help you deal with the quantity or breadth of issues. At senior levels, the number of people who want your time is far greater than the time you have. The number of things that need your attention is far greater than the number you have handled earlier, and the number of simultaneous things you have to manage is far greater than what you have ever done. The breadth is such that one day in the morning you could be discussing the long-term strategic plan, and in the afternoon the same day you might have to deal with the next week's issues, and there is an exponential change in the number, quantity, and breadth of issues that you have to deal with as you climb up the corporate ladder. And to manage that, you have to drive an exponential increase in your productivity as well. Again and again, I have seen people move from junior to middle levels and then to senior levels and fail somewhere on the way. And usually, their failure at the higher levels is mistakenly attributed to a lack of capabilities. It is not that. Often it is because they have not grown their productivity in proportion to the higher ask of the senior level. And folks, a productivity increase does not happen by itself. It can't be taken for granted. It has to be catalyzed by you. A classic manifestation of this was a senior person with a fairly independent responsibility. This person was overworked, overwhelmed, and trying to his level best, and yet the business was going nowhere. People were unhappy, and there were no results to show. This person saw himself or herself as Atlas, carrying the entire load of the business on his or her shoulders. Often externalized to say everything is broken, it needs to be fixed, and hence he or she has to work 14 hours a day, and so on. And these are classic symptoms of poor productivity, lack of knowing how to be productive in a complex environment, how to organize on oneself and manage your energy and time. The Atlas stereotype is a positive must, but it is a must. It simply hides the real problem, which is poor productivity. So the next time you are working your butt off but nothing gets done, you know where the problem is. Or the next time you feel that the entire company, your team, or your business needs you and you are at loss, and that is the reason you work so hard, you know what the problem is. It is poor productivity. The how of productivity. Now that you are aware of the need to catalyze growth in your productivity, let us move on to how to achieve that. Productivity is a complex subject comprising many facets, including time management, prioritizations, discipline, learning to differentiate the important or urgent from the less important or less urgent, and the art of delegation, the skill of multitasking, and so on and so forth. Each of these aspects can be a book in itself, and I would encourage all readers to make an effort at getting better at each of them. A good way is through your TMRR process and reflection. Identify what you think you need to get better at, and then start to focus on that. In this chapter, however, I am not going to focus on these various facets. Instead, I'm going to share some of my experiences of boosting productivity, which catalysts have worked for me, and how I have focused on growing my productivity. This is not a replacement for the facets above. These are just my belief and learning. I have found two methods that help catalyze the growth of my productivity. One is derived from Stephen Covey's concept of the circle of influence, and the other is my own method of allocating time to my priorities, and something I call the Rockforce method. Focus on the circle of influence. 2 decades ago, I read Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. one of the greatest self-development books of the modern era. One of the concepts in the book that I found very interesting was that the circle of the influence. For those of you who have not read the book, I shall briefly explain the concept, focusing on those aspects which are relevant into increasing productivity. The core of the concept is that broadly everything that has an effect on you, impacts you, and is of consequence to you can be divided into two broad circles. One is called the circle of influence, which comprises all those things that you have an influence on, and the other is circle of concern, which comprises things that impact you directly or indirectly, but which you cannot influence. These are two concentric circles: the inner circles, the smaller circle, which comprises things that you can influence, and the outer circle, the bigger circle, which comprises things on which you don't have an influence. This is systematically represented in the drawing below. Circle of influence and circle of concern. While this concept can be used for all aspects of life, for the purpose of this chapter, I would like you to visualize this in the context of things that work and you dream of being very successful in your career. But to be successful, you must deliver high quality and high quantity of output at work. You must deliver results which are compelling so that people take note of them, and thus create a good reputation and long-term career success for yourself. For you to deliver those results, there are a set of things which are within you, sphere of influence in your circle of influence, and equally, there are things that impact your ability to deliver results at work that are not in your influence, and those are in the outer circle, the circle of concern. As I become a senior at work and started facing the productivity problems that all senior managers inevitably face, I felt I'm working damn hard, yet I don't seem to be producing results as easily as I did when I was a junior. I was quite confident that it was not an issue of my ability, and hence I knew I had to find the answer in my productivity and where I spend time and how I organize myself. That is when I applied the concept of the circle of influence to productivity. I realized through the MRR reflection that I was most productive with my time when I focused on an aspect within my circle of influence. In those things, I was like a magician, producing impactful results at will. Equally, I found through my reflection that there were areas on which I spent a lot of my time and still created limited output, and consistently MRR in those areas led me to the conclusion that most of those areas were in my circle of concern. I realized that spending time on areas in my circle of concern was producing minimal result and was an extraordinary waste of my time, the greatest productivity killer I had. There, folks, in my simplest, most obvious, and yet super effective key to productivity, you are at your productive best when you focus on things which you have an influence on, which you can impact. Avoid spending time on areas where you don't have any influence or impact. The other way of stating the same thing is that highly productive people are those who spend all their time on things to which they can make a difference, where they have an influence. Such a people are highly productive with their time, and assuming they have a good quality experience algorithm, they created fantastic value and results. Such an individual often gets a lot done for one person and can be rather awe-inspiring at times. Of course, the benefits of this habit can go beyond this just productivity. As Stephen Covey explained, the more you focus on your circle of influence, the more it grows, and slowly and steadily it starts to cover more the areas that earlier fell under your circle of concern. Hence, this habit is also an effective means of growing your influence over time. I would urge readers to read Stephen Covey's book for a clearer understanding. I'm limiting my articulation here to the impact this has on personal productivity at work. Let us further explore what happens when you don't focus on your circle of influence and instead spend time on your circle of concern, and clearly you don't produce great result and value. Hence, it is obvious that the circle of concern is the killer of productivity. But as I reflected on my own experiences, my DMRR told me that the impact was on more than just productivity. I realized that when I spent time in my circle of concern, I felt irritated, angry, frustrated, at times incapable of creating results, inadequate, a whole host of negative emotion. I came to the realization that the circle of concern was not just a productivity. killer and a time waster, but it was more importantly an energy killer. And the biggest realization for me personally was that it kills every energy disproportionate to the time to spend on it. I realized that I might have spent only half an hour on something that was in my circle of concern, but it often destroyed my energy and created enough negativity to kill the productivity of a whole day. This then, in my second key, productivity, that productivity is not just about productivity of time, but also about productivity of energy. I realized that the productivity of energy is destroyed by spending even a small amount of time on the circle of concern, and that energy loss has an impact even when you subsequently start focusing on your circle of influence. Time in a circle of concern like a poison. It takes only a small amount to have a negative impact on the larger whole. Hence, my two keys super high productivity based on my learning in my work life are 1. To increase your productivity, focus relentlessly on whatever is in your circle of influence. Spend all your time on what you can make a difference to, even if in the beginning it looks small. Number 2, avoid the circle of concern like the plague. It is not about how much time you waste there. Maybe you can afford to waste that time, but the more harmful impact of it is the energy it destroys, the negativity it creates in you, which then has a cascading impact even on the time you spend in your circle of influence. A question that often comes up in my session is, does that mean I ignore what is in my circle of concern? What if some of that is very important? I do believe that you must summon the courage to ignore what is in the circle of concern and focus all your time and energy on what is in your circle of influence. That will create a virtuous cycle of productive results, wherein what is in the circle of concern will become less and less important over time. However, for a moment, let us assume there is something in the circle of concern that is so critical that it can't be ignored. Let us say you are a salesperson who has been pursuing a new large deal for a long time, and finally, after many attempts, the customer gives you a trial order, and you know that ensuring delivery of that order on time with no quality defect is important to create future businesses. And however, this is in the hands of the supply chain team and not fully under your influence. And what then is the right way to deal with it? There are two approaches. One to can take for what is in your circle of concern. A truism of life is that everything that is in your circle of concern is in somebody else's circle of influence. In an organization context, it could mean a co-worker outside of your team, a vendor, and etc. A good way of dealing with important things in your circle of concern is to identify in whose circle of influence they are and then strike a partnership with that person. And for any partnership to work, there has to be a win-win situation. This means that there is something in your circle of influence which is of value to that person, and you have to create value for him or her in return for your circle of concern issue being addressed. So the first approach is to strike up partnerships. The second approach to dealing with things in the circle of concern is to find a path to them through your circle of influence. Let's suppose that you are dependent on information and data from a colleague who is not in your team and whom you don't have adequate influence on. In the past, this individual has often given you poor quality information, and this has impacted the subsequent work that you do with that data. Now, this is in your circle of concern, and thinking about this creates all the straight and negative energy that circle of concern items create. Are there paths through your circle of influence that lead to a solution? You could possibly call the person and actively teach and coach them how to collect the data and send it to you. In a way, you are doing something which that person manager should have done. You might think it is a waste of time, but doing this is better than being stressed about your circle of concern. Another possible path through your circle of influence is to give yourself enough time to check the data when it comes to redo it if required. Both these approaches are within your circle of influence, stuff you can do. But what most people do is spend a lot of time agonizing about something in their circle of concern and in the process creating negativity and destroying productivity instead of finding simple pathways through their circle of influence to issues in their circle of concern. In Chapter 7, we will apply this approach of finding pathways through the circle of influence to the more complex problem of how to find a good boss, an issue that is in everybody's circle of concern. The rock first method. Apart from the circle of influence approach, the other method I have personally used to keep my productivity high is the rock first method. Before I talk about it, I would like to narrate a story that I am sure each of you has come across at some time or the other. A teacher takes a glass jar and places it on the table along with some sand and rock. In the first instance, she pours all the sand into the jar, which becomes nearly full, and thereafter can accommodate only a couple of rocks. In the second instance, she puts all the rock into the jar and then pours the sand on top of that. The sand flows into the spaces between the rock. A fair amount of sand is in the jar, only some is left. So in the first instance, all the sand is consumed by very few rock. In the second instance, all the rock and the good quantity of the sand are consumed. The trick lay in putting rock in first. The teacher then goes on to tell the class that the rocks are the more important things in your life, your health, your relationship, your learning, and etc. The sun is the less important or trivial things. If you come to the rocks after dealing with the sun, you will only deal with a few important things. The bulk of important things will not be dealt with. However, if you turn it around and first deal with the rock, the important things, then you will get a lot done and will have to deal with only as much as sand you have space for. This is what I see on a daily basis in the workplaces around me. People spending all their time on sand and getting very few rocks into the jar. And most people feel that they know their priorities, they know what is important. However, they mistakenly assume that just because they know what is important, they are actually prioritizing it and dealing with it. That is myth. It is more likely that you know what is important and what your rocks are, but the bulk of your time and energy is still spent on the sun. To make sure people understand, I often do an exercise with them. On one sheet of paper, I make them write what they think is important. Things which is, if they did them well, would create learning, lead to career success, and make them feel productive. Once they have written this on the sheet of paper, we fold it away, not to be opened till later. Then I ask them what all they did the previous month, which activities they did, and where they spent their time, energy, and more money and resources, and where they got their teams to spend their time, money, and resources. It's a detailed exercise. After that, based on where they spend their time, energy, resources, we try to write down which of these could have been important. If time, energy, resources were spent on them, then this would have been considered important. So in a way, we retrospectively derive what would have been important. This list of the derived important things is then written on another sheet of paper. Then comes to the most interesting part. We compare the two sheets of paper, the first sheet that what people thought was important to them, and the second list, the derived importance thing. I'm sure you are not surprised when I say that in most cases, there is a very little in common between the two lists, and this is the greatest tragedy of productivity, that most people do not actually spend their time, energy, resources on what they think is important to them. This is true of life in general, but let us focus here on work. At work, people know what is important. They know what that focusing on the important things will produce result, get them success, create value, and learning to sharpen their algorithms. The tragedy is that despite knowing that most people do not spend their time, energy, resources at work on those things, and hence never achieve the success they are capable of. In my own professional journey, I know I was blessed to have an inbuilt God-given TMRR model which kept sharpening my algorithm. It is my privilege and my blessing to have been born with that. But despite that, for a fair share of my career, I knew I was not producing the kind of impact I could, the kind of value I was capable of. And then one day, the bolt from my TMRR struck. I reflected and realized the reason for it. It was the sun and rock, disease. I knew what the important things were, but I did not have a process to ensure that I spent my time, energy, resources on these things. My time was being consumed by the sun first. That is when I came up with the second approach I have been following to manage my productivity, the method of allocating time to the rock first. it is a very simple approach I have been following for many years now. At the beginning of each month, I make a list of important things I consider priorities. I force myself to order this as well, putting the most important ones at the top, and most times, this list is not very different from the list of the previous month, and that is how it should be. Priorities should not change often, but I do make the list each month and then I start by allocating time in my calendar for the next month, starting with the most important things at the top. Once I have given as much time as the top item requires, I move to the next item, and so on and so on. I keep moving down my priority list till I have allocated 85% of the time I have for the next month. The balance 15% is what I leave for the unavoidable some that all of us have to deal with. This 85% is formalized. It is in my calendar, and I have developed the discipline to never compromise on this. I never allow the sun to replace one of the rock, and this approach of all formal calendar allocation of time at work to what I consider the rock has been among the greatest productivity unlock of my work life. This also had some interesting and unintended benefits. It significantly improved my delegation. It became very simple for me. If it was not one of the work I had time for, if it was not in my calendar with allocated time, then I didn't need to do it myself. Every such a thing is delegatable, and one of my team members can do it. I delegated a great deal and ensured that I got out of the way of my team. In such a thing, you decide, you do it. It is not in my calendar, it is not a work for me, was my mantra, and that delegation freed me and at the same time energized my team. They had a set of things they could do with the complete freedom without worrying that the boss was constantly breathing down their necks, and my assertion to each one of you is that too much of your time is being spent managing the sun. It is a myth to assume that because you know what the rock are, you are spending your time, energy, and money on this. It does not happen by itself. You need to catalyze the process of ensuring that you are actually focusing on the rock. I told you what my method is. It is simple, and you can follow it as well. Equally, you can find your own method. Either way, make sure that you are catalyzing the attention to the rock left to itself. It is always the sun that flows into the jar first. So, these are my two methods, the high on productivity, the circle of influence approach, and the rock first approach. Despite these two approaches, I wouldn't say I am at my productive best all the time. It is a very difficult thing to be, but again, thanks to my TMRR, I have figured out how to recognize when I'm not at my productive best. I have learned that the symptom to look out for is the feeling of frustration. Frustration happens when you feel like you are doing your best and yet things are not moving ahead. Then I go back and analyze why. I assess whether the circle of concern is taking up too much of my focus. I go back and check whether I'm spending my time, energy, resources on the rock, and typically the problem would be in one of these areas. And once I correct it, I can sense my productivity come back up fairly quickly. I would urge each one of you also to try and recognize the symptoms for yourself when you are in a low productivity phase. Recognize the symptoms and fix the problems, and I would be willing to place a wager that whenever you feel frustrated, if you stop and analyze why, there is a very high probability that you are in your circle of concern. Time and energy that is gone can never come back. Be at your productive best as for as much of your work life as possible, as it is crucial for your success. Unleash the catalyst. Number 1. To be successful, to generate real individual growth, just developing your experience algorithm is not enough. You have to employ that algorithm in a highly productive way. Your productivity is the means by which you convert your experience algorithm into value results for yourself and your organization. Number 2, the higher you go in the corporate ladder, the more you need to grow your productivity. And your productivity does not increase by itself. It has to be catalyzed to grow. Number 3, the catalysts I have used in my work life for my productivity are A. Relentless focus on the circle of influence and avoiding like a fluke what is in the circle of concern. And B. Having a disciplined workforce time allocation system where I ensure that I provide my time or energy for the works and not the sun. Number 4. If you would like to, you can use my method. If not, you can develop your own. Whatever be the method, please do not ignore your productivity. Unleashing the catalyst, summarizing part 1 and setting up part 2. In the part 1, we have covered the means to driving real individual growth in 3 important concepts. Number 1, converting time into experience is the very bedrock of real individual growth. An effective TMRR model is the key to converting the time you are spending at work into an experience algorithm that will drive your success in the future. Number 2, applying the TMRR algorithm on major learning cycle is an exponential way to drive real individual growth. Number 3, just building the experience algorithm is not enough. You have to parallelly grow your productivity. Productivity is the means through which you can have covered the experience algorithm into result. The key to growing productivity is to focus on the circle of influence and to make sure you allocate your time to the rocks and not the sun. However, real individual growth has to be backed up by good career management. I have often seen individuals with a fantastic experience, algorithm, and productivity being tripped up by poor career decision, which they then struggle to recover from. We are very much in a foucault, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity world, including in how careers develop and how they are managed. It is important to have the right approach to managing your career. To make the right career decision if you want to convert your real individual growth into long-term career success. And the beauty is, the principle remains the same. Focus on the deeds and the result will come. Focus on the real individual growth, which is the driver of career success, and that career success will be yours. The next section, part 2. Is about career management. It's about helping you understand how to make career decisions while focusing on the real individual growth. Part 2. Number 5. Win where it matters. Most of us have heard the story of the hare and the tortoise. It is the story of the race between the swift, agile rabbit and the slow lumbering tortoise. The rabbit starts at a rapid pace and then takes a break, while the lumbering tortoise carries on without a break and finally wins the race. The moral of the story is that slow and steady wins the race. When I see youngsters today chasing career, it often looks like the story of the rabbit. They get out of block in hurry, want the frenetic pace of career growth in the initial stages and then lose steam where it matters, near the finish line. I do not advocate slow and steady wins the race for career, but I do have an adaptation of the moral for professional success, and that is win where it matters. You don't have to win all the time. If you want to have a truly glorious career, then it is important that you win in the second half of your career. That's the only thing that matters. Everything else is immaterial. That is my career morale. Win where it matters in the second half of your career. Careers today are really around 40 years long, and it is important to internalize that it is a marathon, not a sprint. A person's career can broadly be split into 2 halves, the first half and the second half. The length of the 2 halves is not important and does not have to be mathematically equal. It can be 20 years each, it can be 25 and 15 or 18 and 22, but the broad concept is that careers have 2 halves. I have observed many people through the journey of their career. I have seen those who succeeded, those who were less successful, those who look like they had a good start but did not achieve their potential, those who look like they had a bad start but seemed to overachieve, and those whose career had twists and turns to those whose career had more steady, straight paths. Having observed all these people in their career, and it is a lifetime of observation, I have come to 2 conclusions. Conclusion 1. The more significant career achievements are often in the second half of the career. Number 2. Most people succeed in the first half of their career, very few in the second. The second half is where the true successful is created. Let us start with the first conclusion. The more significant career achievements are often in the second half of the career. A good way of understanding this is to compare to people with similar qualification and capabilities who passed out the same college at the same time. Let us say we compare their career after 40 years. When they hang up their boots and conclude that one of them had a very successful career with a great accomplishment and second had a more moderate career with a fewer accomplishment, let us say the first person had a career of 100 points and the second had a career of 60 points, and the gap in their career success was 40 points. The interesting thing you will find is that The first half of the career often explain only a very small portion of the success difference, say only 5 of the 40 points, while the bulk of the success difference, 35 points, is explained by the difference in their success in the second half. If you continue to do this comparison for various professions, you will find the same story playing out. Let us compare two people with a marketing major from the same business school. You will find that both were possibly heads of marketing for decent-sized businesses at the end of the first half of their career. But at the end of the second half, one of them went on to become a global CEO of a big MNC, while the other did not make more progress than what he or she had achieved at the end of the first half. If you look at the two engineers who passed out at the same time, you will find that the both of them went on to possibly had large plans as a plant manager at the end of the first half of their career. But one of them went on to then become head of company end-to-end supply chain and manufacturing, while the other conducted to stay as a plant manager or do functional jobs. One could do this again and again. In the most cases, you will reach the same conclusion. Most people of similar qualification and capabilities achieve roughly the same career success and result in the first half of their career, but there is an extraordinary difference of success in the second half. This then led me to the conclusion that the more significant career achievements are often in the second half of the career. Career success. Easy in the first half, difficult in the second half. As I observed the careers of several people, as of them seem to have achieved something in the first half of their career, and differences in capabilities and potential did not seem to have created a stark difference in the first half of career. Equally often that most people find it difficult to succeed in the second half. It is almost like you keep progressing, steadily growing in your career in the first half, and then that growth suddenly slows down and almost comes to a stop in a second half. As a thumb rule, I would say 95% of people are successful in the first halves of their career, but it is the other way around in the second half, where only 5% succeed and 95% fail. Fail is a provocative word, I admit. But what I really mean is that 95% do not really make much progress in their career in the second half beyond what they have already achieved in the first. The question that naturally follows is the why of it. Why do most people find it easy to succeed in the first half of their career and difficult to succeed in the second? There are three factors that explain this. Number one, the nature of the organizational pyramid. Number two, the impact of the boss and supervisors. Number three, the preparation required to succeed at each level. The nature of the organizational pyramid. The nature of the organizational pyramid is the first half of the person's career differs from a second half. In the early phase of their career, people are at the bottom of the pyramid, which has a wider base, while in the later stage of their career, they are in the narrower part of the organizational pyramid. In the first half, the wider base of the organizational pyramid creates more opportunities. The operating principle is that if you are good enough to do the job at the next level, then opportunity is not a constraint. There are enough opportunities at that level. And hence, career progress in the first half is the function of the absolute, not the relative. If you are good enough, then by virtue of the pyramid, you will move ahead. However, in the second half, the organizational pyramid is narrower. Fewer opportunities come up. Also, every time an opportunity comes up, there are many more claimants. Hence, moving up is not just a function of how good you are, but also how good you are relatively to others. Another factor is that if an opportunity comes around and you don't get it, then the person who gets it stays in that role for 4 to 5 years, and tenures at the senior level are longer, so the next opportunity often does not come immediately. To summarize, there are fewer opportunities in the second half, and those few opportunities are determined on relativity and not absolutely capability. Hence, opportunity becomes a constraint in the second half of your career and impact of the boss. The second factor is the impact of the boss and supervision. which is much higher in the first half than in the second. In the first half, the results we produce are not just a function of our capabilities and what we do, but also a function of a very active supervision we get from our bosses and the hierarchy of our organization. In the first half, bosses and the organizational systems and the processes make up the four weaknesses that individuals have, and hence it does not impede their career progress. However, in the second half, the supervision that people receive from their bosses and others in the organization is limited. Results have to be produced based on your own capabilities, and impact can be measured far more accurately. There is nobody to compensate for weaknesses which are often exposed at this stage, and so people fail more often in the second half of their career preparation for the next level. This third factor is the preparation required to succeed at the next level. In the first half of career, the next higher role is somewhat similar to the current role, and so the current role often allows a degree of preparation for the next. Somebody could go from being an assistant brand manager to a brand manager from an area sales manager to a regional sales manager for a larger geography. In each of these examples, the current level offers the opportunity for a degree of preparation, as the next level is simply a more complex, higher skill version of the current job. However, in the second half of the career at senior level, the next job is often fundamentally different from the previous one. It could be a transition from being head of sales of being CEO, which is the transition from being a functional expert to a business leader. It could be a transition from being a plant head to being the head of the end supply chain. A transition from technical skills to a more strategic and holistic responsibility. In each of these, the current job of the individual does not prepare them adequately to succeed at the next level, and so people often have to learn after getting there in order to succeed. And this is another key reason why people experience more success in the first half and more failure in the second halves of their career. To reiterate, the three factors that explain why most people succeed in the first half of their career and very few in the second, as explained above, are the nature of the organizational pyramid, the impact of the boss and supervisor, and lastly, the preparation required to succeed at each level. So, let's look at the two conclusions that we have arrived at. Number one, conclusion. The more significant career achievements are often in the second half of the career. And conclusion number two, most people succeed in the first half of their career, very few in the second. The two together set up the career challenge for the most people. Where you need to succeed is where it is more difficult to succeed. And the second half is where you need to succeed, and yet that is when it is more difficult to succeed, and hence you need a catalyst. The catalyst of foundationing, building in the first half to ensure success in the second half. While the success that matter is success in the second half, the foundation of the success is often laid entirely in the first half. Far too often, people get to the second half of their career, recognize that they do not have the necessary skill and capability to succeed there, and come to the painful realization that it is too late to pick up the skills and capabilities. They have not invested in the right foundation in the first half, on which the pillars of success in the second half are built. The most visible symptom of this is the specter of people past the age of 50 nearing on the end of their career who often stagnate and are not able to contribute meaningfully. And mostly, these people are also realize that they fail to keep up and contribute, but despite trying hard, they fail to acquire the skill at the age of to make a difference. This is visible in most organizations, especially in more human organizations, which let such people serve out their tenure and retire gracefully. Youngsters in these organizations often look at these people and snigger among themselves in a private conversation. They are often referred to as the old guard or passengers. What is interesting is that these youngsters are usually not thinking of how they can build their foundations in the first half to avoid the same trap of turning into the old guard of tomorrow.